Aloha mai kākou e nā hoa makamaka mai kalahiki a kalakau. Velina nui me ke aloha. Mahalo nui no ke akua ko ana o kākou no ka pono o ka lahui, no ka pono o ka aina, a me ka pono o ka vaina hoi. Ea he o lalona e au e kālele ana ke koʻikoʻi o ka vai, a me ka aina ke kahi. E kahi o e haʻu ka ua. Kanta taro when there is rain, which means to do your work when opportunity affords. Aloha, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's July 28th, 2025 regular board meeting of the Honolulu Board of Water Supply. Before beginning today's meeting, I'd like to state that our board is dedicated to providing safe, dependable, and affordable water now and into the future. At this time, we would like to share a brief recording with reminders on public participation, as well as virtual meeting regulations for board members as required by law.
Materials for this meeting under HRS Section 92-7.5 are accessible at boardofwatersupply.com/boardmeetings. The public may attend this meeting in person at the BWS Public Service Building, located at 630 South Beretania Street. The public may also view a live stream of today's meeting on our website at boardofwatersupply.com/live. We have been accepting written or oral testimony for today's meeting. Instructions and an online submittal form are available at boardofwatersupply.com/testimony. The deadline to submit advanced written testimony has passed. Testimony received by noon today have been distributed to the board members. We will continue to accept written testimony today through our online form. Oral testimony in person or remotely will be accepted during today's meeting. To facilitate as much in-person and remote testimony as reasonably possible during the time allotted, pre-registration and submittal of a written version of testimony at boardofwatersupply.com/testimony is strongly encouraged. To testify in person, please register using our online form or come to the Public Service Building at 630 South Beretania Street. We have a representative in the lobby to provide intake and further instructions. To request to testify remotely, please complete the online form at boardofwatersupply.com/testimony. Requesters will receive an email containing links and instructions to join the Zoom session. Testifiers will have 2 minutes to state their position. A timekeeper will alert testifiers when there is 1 minute remaining. Once the 2 minutes are up, please summarize to allow time for questions from the board. Then, make room for the next testifier. Board members attending any board meeting remotely must be visible to the public to be considered present and meet quorum guidelines. Board members participating remotely must also disclose their location and anyone present at their location during roll call. Meeting participants who are calling or video conferencing in, please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. If you have a question, comment, or wish to enter or second a motion on an action item, please unmute your microphone and identify yourself before continuing to speak. If you encounter technical issues during today's meeting, please use the Zoom chat to send a direct message to our support team. Their names are listed in the message to all participants. To open the chat window, please click on the text bubble icon on the Zoom toolbar.
We'd like to take a moment for roll call for the board members. When I call your name, please say aye, and if attending remotely, make the appropriate disclosures. I will start with board member Brian Andaya.
Hi, this is Brian Andaya. I am in my office conference room with the door closed.
Thank you. Aloha. Board member Jean Albano.
I'm in my office alone.
Thank you, Jean. Aloha. In the boardroom today is Vice Chair Jonathan Kaneshiro,
Hi.
as well as board member Lance Wilhelm.
Yep.
Aloha. And I'm in office alone with the door closed as well. Absent and excused today are board members Edwin Sniffen as well as Kehaulani Pu'u. Also in the room today is Manager Ernie Lau.
Aloha.
Aloha. Deputy Manager Erwin Kawata.
Here.
Aloha. Manager Secretary Kim Kuai. Aloha. Board Secretary Joey Cruz, that's you.
Here.
Aloha. Information Specialist Wayne Maria.
Here.
Aloha. And it looks like we have Jessica Wong from City and County Corp Counsel with us online as well. Today we have two items on our action agenda. The first is approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held June 23rd, 2025. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
So moved by Lance
Second.
So it's
and seconded by
Gene.
Gene.
I think it was.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Gene made the motion.
Okay,
Chair.
thank you, Lance.
Yeah.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Vice Chair Jonathan Conachero,
Abstain.
Board Member Brian Andaya,
Aye.
Board Member Lance Wallham.
I'd like to acknowledge I was not present for the entire meeting, but I vote aye.
Thank you. Board Member Gino Vano.
Aye.
And Chair Nolly Anthony.
Aye.
Chair motion passes with 4 ayes.
Thank you. Please note for the record. Joy, I just saw that some testimony came in. I didn't get a chance to open it yet. Are there any testimony on items requiring board action numbers 1 or 2?
No, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to item requiring board action number 2, approval of the minutes for the special meeting held June 30th, 2025. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Okay, I think that was Brian and then Jean. Is that correct?
Yes.
I moved. Yeah, this is Brian.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Brian. Roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Vice Chair Jonathan Conachero,
Abstain.
Board Member Brian Andaya,
Aye.
Board Member Lance Wallham,
Aye.
Board Member Gino Vano. And Chair Nolly Anthony.
Aye.
Chair motion passes with 4 ayes.
Okay, thank you so much. Please note for the record. Thank you. We'll be moving on to items for information. Item for information number 1, update on Board of Water Supply's response to potential impacts of Red Hill fuel contamination. Chair recognizes Joyce Lynn. Hello, Joyce.
Aloha, Chair, and good afternoon, board members. This is your July 2025 Red Hill update. This past month, here are some of our notable events that we attended to. On July 1st, we filed a Federal Tort Claims Act lawsuit against the Navy in response to the Red Hill contamination releases from the facility. And on July 14th, the Board of Water Supply representatives, we attended a legislature information brief provided by the Navy Closure Task Force. During the information brief, the Navy Closure Task Force announced a few informations, specifically Rear Admiral Stephen Barnett. Stephen Barnett will be leaving the Navy Closure Task Force in the coming months and will be replaced by Rear Admiral Collins. They also talked about the various PFAS investigation going on under the CERCLA process at the Red Hill Bulk Fuel Storage Facility. And they talked about the reactivation of their 2 sources, Aya Halava Shaft and Red Hill Shaft. Also just some of the long-term remediation efforts going on at the facility. So unfortunately, this meeting was actually a special public meeting where the Red Hill Committee was not taking any testimony at the time. So the Board of Water Supply representatives that attended in person were unable to provide any input or corrections to any of the statements that was made. So to clarify, the Board of Water Supply, we were not involved in the development of the Navy's long-term drinking water monitoring plan, nor the extended drinking water monitoring plan. Although the Board of Water Supply attends the remediation roundtable and subject matter expert meetings on the invitation by EPA, we have not been given the same level of data or transparency as the regulators such as DOH and EPA. And a little bit more updates regarding the tank closure and cleaning process. As of July 11th, little over 1,900 gallons of residual fuel has been removed from the pipelines and the tanks, and a total of 323 gallons of sludge removed from the bottoms of the tanks. So this plan, the tank closure plan supplemental number 4, was submitted to the regulators, EPA and DOH, by the Navy in the May timeframe, but was only released to the public for review early in July. Our technical team is still reviewing this supplement plan as of right now. We will provide comments to this after we have a deeper dive into the plan itself. The plan itself does propose a lot of closing in place. So once they finish cleaning the tanks, they plan to remove certain aspects of within the tank, staircase, things like that, and then we'll just shut the facility itself off and close it in place. Upcoming events that we are looking forward to is the Community Representation Initiative meeting this Thursday. Unfortunately, as of today, we still have not gotten any information on the location of this meeting, but we know it is happening and that the Navy should be attending this event, this meeting actually. And also August 20th, the Navy Closure Task Force will be having another one of their quarterly open house at the Oahu Veterans Center. That concludes my update, and I'm available for any questions.
Members, any questions?
I have a question.
Please.
Yeah. I'm just curious about the UH study. Is there any updates? I wasn't here last month, unfortunately, but since then, has there been any results?
So we had our monthly update check-in with the UH research group right after the board meeting last month. And they mentioned they are detecting some detections, but they still need to do a lot more analysis on their detections to come up with a conclusion on what they're seeing.
I'm just curious. Thank you.
And we're having our check-in again this week, actually.
Yeah, we do appreciate the University of Hawaii under Dr. Don Thomas giving us periodic updates. We requested periodic updates, so we meet maybe once a month to get an update. So I think the last time we met, they may have started to detect some of the dye tracer in Red Hill Shaft, but it took a lot longer than they had expected.
That's just too preliminarily to say any.
Yeah, I want to be careful too, because it will come out in their final reports once they issue that.
Yeah.
And we're trying to be careful not to speak on behalf of the University of Hawaii.
Yeah, of course.
But we do appreciate the dialogue that's happening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joyce.
Any other questions, members?
Chair
Maybe I have one.
Kehal just joined us.
Yes, Chair recognizes Kealani Pu'u. I think she joined at 2:08 p.m. Keala, if you could just make the appropriate disclosure for your remote engagement in the meeting.
Hi, aloha, Kehau here, and I am alone.
Thank you. Ernie and Joyce, I'm wondering if you can just give a little bit of feedback on the meeting that you attended at the Ledge. And Joyce, you made note that you weren't able to correct any of the record. Were there large discrepancies in what was reported?
There were just a few statements that were made that actually Ernie physically stood up and wanted to provide
I raised my hand as I could.
but because of the special meeting platform, they were not taking any testimony, or they didn't try to ask the Board of Water Supply if what was said was correct. So we just wanted to use this opportunity to clarify some of the statements that was.
I think the one of the points that really got us going was the statement by one of the Navy officials at the table, was that we were involved with the development of long-term drinking water monitoring plan for testing the Navy's water system at serving Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, and also their extended drinking water monitoring plan. And I wanted to clarify that it is absolutely untrue. We were in no way involved in or consulted with while that plan was being developed. That was between strictly the Navy, the Department of Health, and the US EPA. But I was disappointed, and maybe that was a mistake on the individual's part to represent that. Like Joyce mentioned, on the remediation roundtable, which looks at remediation, the hydrogeology issues, the groundwater modeling, we're invited to a certain degree to participate in those discussions. And along with the Commission of Water Resource Management, the USGS, United States Geological Survey, and the University of Hawaii. But like Joyce pointed out, we're sort of 1 foot in the meeting and 1 foot out of it. We're not actually privy to all the data and discussions that are happening about the hydrogeology, the groundwater models. They have refused to allow us to participate in that. So we're really at a disadvantage. They ask us for our comments, and we're glad to provide that. But what's very unfair is that we're not given same access to information ahead of time to review. So it's really almost appears that our participation is sort of a rubber stamp on that effort to say that Board of Water Supply is attending these meetings. But actually, it isn't really true that we're being given access to all the same information that the regulators, the Navy, the Department of Health, and EPA, and their experts have access to. We would love to have access to that information because we are willing to give our honest and technical feedback. But we're at a severe disadvantage. And I think a condition of us getting access has always come from the Navy, that we sign a non-disclosure agreement, which I refuse to do because we are a public agency and our community needs to understand what's happening with the resources and what's being done to clean it up. Joyce, you want to add anything?
No, I think you summed it up very well.
I'm trying to control my temper, but it's been very frustrating to say the least. So I think they've now moved the remediation roundtable meetings to once a quarter. So anyway, that's the perspective, Chair.
Thank you, Ernie, and thank you, Joyce. Also, board members, I think you got a paper copy. There's also an email copy going around for testimony from Meredith Wilson. I'd invite staff and members to read it. Staff, there are a couple of questions that she asks that I'd ask you folks to make sure that we get answered to her in her query. And we thank Meredith for her time to write in testimony. Joy, are there any other testifiers in the room or anyone else online who wishes to testify on this matter?
No, Chair, no other testifiers.
Okay, if there are no other comments and no other testifiers, we're moving on to item number 2, recruitment status. Chair recognizes Michelle Thomas.
Good afternoon, board chair and board members. Thank you for allowing me to present this quarter's recruitment status update. For the period of April 2025 through June 2025, we had 19 new hires, 16 promotions, 1 demotion, 1 transfer, 8 separations, and 6 canceled requests. We have had quite a few new hires and promotions at the BWS over the last quarter. And while our retirements have slightly slowed, we are seeing that many employees are still reevaluating their life circumstances and moving to other city departments or elsewhere, which is pretty typical across the job market. So what I wanted to do was provide you with a little bit of some additional information as to what we've been doing at the board in this last quarter to kind of give you some highlights of how we're continuing to grow the BWS as evidenced by the many new hires that we've had over the last quarter. So the following is a presentation to highlight some of the ongoing recruitment and retention efforts being done by the BWS. We continue to make concerted efforts in recruitment. We're continuing to work with community partners and participate in a variety of events and to promote our vacancies. We've participated in 2 major hiring events in coordination with the City and County of Honolulu and the state with the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations. In April, on April 11th and 12th, we participated in the big hiring effort that was done as a cooperative event between the city, the DLIR, as well as the BWS as one of the career event organizations that was looking for to promote our vacancies. That event was actually really successful, as you can see by many of the pictures here. We did have quite a few people who did visit us, including manager having folks that came and talked to him as well about the various different opportunities at the BWS. We also had another event on April 30th, which is the Hawaii Career Expo, and we have several planned in the upcoming months. Additionally, we continue to promote our various employment opportunities through our social media and through our industry partners. One of the other things that we have been trying to do more of is to really connect with our partners in the industry, including me recently attending the SHRM National 2025 Annual Conference and Expo, which was in San Diego, California, from June 29th through July 2nd. The event also included pre-conference workshops from starting on the June 28th, which I did attend the SHRM People Analytics pre-conference workshop, and then the actual conference itself and Expo after that from the 29th of June through the 2nd of July. During the conference, there were over 375 educational sessions and professional development covering a myriad of topics from HR compliance, labor law updates, diversity, equity, inclusion, talent management, workplace culture, and employee well-being. It also offered various different network opportunities with thousands of HR peers, thought leaders, and industry innovators from a wide variety of sectors. This networking allowed for exchange of ideas with peers facing similar HR and compliance challenges, as well as discussing hiring and retention strategies, workforce trends, and employee engagement. We also were allowed to learn or given opportunities to learn from seasoned HR executives about organizational transformation and leadership best practices. At the expo itself, there were over 600 exhibitors that showcased the latest tools and technologies designed to streamline HR operations and enhance workforce performance. And some of the key takeaways that I was able to get from the conference was in several different categories. First, in the category of modern and risk management and compliance, basically the trend is that lawsuits, shifting regulations and cyber threats and the like are requiring organizations to be more transformative and need to use proactive tools to process all of these different changes and also steward their employees into, the new normal, as we like to call it. Also give us opportunities to use tools to predict issues or red flags, document decisions and actions, and provide policy resources for both employees as well as management. Additionally, they emphasize people-centered technology, basically indicating that technology, the use of artificial intelligence and automation, should be useful, trustworthy, and human-centered, should empower people and not replace people. Additionally, there's an emphasis placed on the employee well-being experience, specifically on wellness, flexibility in benefits, as well as work schedules and other areas where we can provide opportunities to help employees meet the demands of both their workplace lives as well as their, integrate it with their home-based lives. So then that way there is a lot more engagement in the actual workplace. Since we don't have a lot of opportunity to really affect and impact employee benefits, where we have looked at it is from the perspective of what innovations we might be able to do with regard to work schedules and employee resource groups and things like that, that would allow for us to make the hybrid and flexible work schedule perks, as they would call it, actually work for us at the BWS. Additionally, we've also looked at opportunities for collaboration, communication, and cohesion. And we've looked at, ways to make the work more meaningful and, have a sense of belonging for our employees. This also includes, us looking at more purposeful leadership and inclusion for both, Kupuna and the younger generations that are in the workplace, because right now we have about 5 generations of employees in the workplace, and it's, as you can expect, very difficult to really get everyone on the same page. So we are looking at potential opportunities for closing generational divides, creating a more resilient and purpose-driven and data-driven culture, and prioritize work skills, as well as coaching and mentoring for new employees from those folks who have that generational and institutional knowledge that we have in the workplace. So from that perspective, the main theme of the conference was that it was from HR moving from firefighting to more aligning talent, culture, and business strategy. So with that being said, if you'd like to join us at our next recruitment event, we are planning to have one on Wednesday of this week, July 30th, from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Blaisdell Center. There will be a variety of jobs that will be featured for the BWS, both civil service and non-civil service, including our civil service positions that are related to our program administrator and assistant program administrator positions for our field operations, water system operations, and our water quality divisions. We also have accountants at various different levels, civil engineers at various levels, construction inspector and aides, customer service representatives, IT positions, and many others. And the manager and several other representatives of our leadership team will be in attendance to provide their perspectives on what working for the BWS is like. And so we encourage any and all job seekers to apply, and any of you folks who are in the room today to encourage anyone you know who might be interested in working for the Board of Water Supply to come and check out our Ohana. Other than that, that concludes my presentation for today. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Michelle. Members, any questions? Okay, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks,
Thank you for
Michelle.
the update.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 3. Chair wants to welcome Carl Bonham from UHERO to share with us his latest update on the economic forecast. Carl, we appreciate your time and attention to these matters, and it seems like a very timely place to get an update from you. So we appreciate you coming in person today.
Mahalo. Thanks for having me. So the forecast update. So I'm going to talk about the forecast that we released in the second quarter, so in May, and like has been true for the last 6 months, every time you say anything, it changes the next morning or even that day. And so we're in the process of working on an update, and things have changed, some very much for the better. And you may remember from the forecast we released in May, the title of that was something to the effect of federal policies are pushing Hawaii's economy towards a mild recession. So I'll talk about what our views are on that right now. So one of the things that's going to happen is I'm going to talk more about the U.S. economy than I normally would. And that's partly because the U.S. economy is a source of a lot of the uncertainty, but also because as of right now, the U.S. economy is more important to Hawaii than it has been historically, because as of now, 3/4 of all of our visitors are coming from the U.S. and 3/4 of all the visitor spending, actually more than 3/4 of all the visitor spending is U.S. visitor spending. And that's unusual. And that's primarily because the Japanese visitors just haven't returned in any significant numbers and have continued to be slow to return. So the good news is that the U.S. economy continues to be incredibly resilient. This is a graph of the net job change by month. And so you can see the 2024 numbers, about 170,000 jobs on average every month. That's a very large number of jobs to be adding in the economy. And the concern in 2024 was that this was going to cause wage push inflation. In 2025, the data through June is about 130,000 jobs. That's still a pretty healthy number. And there's some cracks in the data that you're beginning to. So basically that 130,000 in the last few data points, it's highly concentrated in leisure and hospitality and in healthcare and social services. Most other sectors are not adding to job growth nationally. This shows the evolution of our forecast for the U.S. economy using the broadest measure, U.S. real GDP growth. These are annual growth rates. And so the dark blue bar were the forecast we made for the first quarter, and then the gold bar are the forecasts we made for the second quarter. And the primary difference between first quarter and second quarter was, well, we had more data, but it was the Liberation Day announcement that we were going to have enormously large tariffs on pretty much every country in the world. And that brought that forecast down. And it's not that we believed that those numbers were going to stay as high as they are. And actually, they have come down significantly from that level. But that brought our forecast for real GDP down from about 2.5% for this year to about 1%. So about 150 basis points. That's a big decline. And one of the things that I don't understand, if you look at other people's forecasts, some local commentators or economists and some national are actually expecting that 2026 will be better. But most of the pain from the policies that are being put in place really are just now beginning to work their way through the economy. It takes a long time. So you notice our forecast is for next year to be about essentially the same, about 1%. So we are not forecasting a U.S. recession. Tariffs don't generally cause recessions. And they generally can cause some slowdown in economic growth and higher prices, but it's not the kind of thing that would normally lead to a U.S. recession. Then longer term, we see the U.S. getting back up to about potential growth of about 2%. So this is a snapshot of what has happened to U.S. tariff rates this year. And it reminds me of this time when I was in Portland and I was supposed to be going out to the coast, and I accidentally set my Maps app to transit. And so I told it I wanted it to go to the coast, but I was driving around in circles in Portland because it kept sending me to a new bus stop. And anyway, that's about what it felt like. And so this slide doesn't end here. The last change was the announcement that we were going to have 30% on the EU and Mexico. And so it ended in June 17th. But since then, we've got an announcement for Japan, which is a 15% tariff for Japan. And then I think it was just Sunday that we got the announcement that there's going to be a 15% tariff across the board on EU goods. So that line would come down. So the average effective tariff rate before all of this was around 2.5%. So that means on average, all the goods that came into the US were being hit with a tariff of about 2.5%. As of the EU announcement, we are at 18.2%. Okay, so roughly, 6, 7, more than that, percent fold increase. So 16 percentage points. And roughly for every percentage point, these are just rules of thumb, but for every percentage point increase in the average effective tariff rate, you could expect the US inflation rate to be about 1/10 of a point higher. So 16 percentage points increase, you ought to expect the inflation rate in the US to be about 1.6% higher than it would have been otherwise. And GDP growth to be, with a 16 percentage point increase, GDP growth ought to be down by 1 to 1.1% from what it would have been otherwise. And so remember, my GDP forecast went from about 2.5 to about 1. That's roughly consistent with the tariff changes we've had so far, if they stay if they stay put. And so one of the things that's still coming is a court decision. So the U.S. Court of International Trade said these are illegal. And then the next day, another court said, okay, but you can leave them in place. But we're going to have another court hearing, and they could all go away in 6 months. So basically, the rule of thumb today is no one knows what's going to happen with tariff policy. And it's highly disruptive. And I was talking with a retailer who sells water sports equipment yesterday, and they told me that first time they've ever experienced this, where within a 4-month period, the manufacturers that they buy from had increased their MSRP, right? Their manufacturer's suggested retail price twice in a 4-month period. So everybody's dealing with this. This shows you how much is being collected in tariff revenue. This is literally how much has been collected. And so if you draw sort of a straight line going all the way back to, say, 2019, these are annualized numbers. So on average, the U.S. economy was collecting about 70, maybe $80 billion a year in tariff revenue. If the tariffs stay the way they were in June, and they're higher now than they were in June, you could expect tariff revenue to run about $330 billion this year. So we're talking $250 billion in extra tariff revenue. Now, the U.S. economy is a $30 trillion economy. So this is what I mean when I say this is not likely to cause a recession, but still, this is 0.6, 0.7% of the U.S. economy. And one of the reasons these numbers aren't higher is because people aren't buying the goods anymore, right? So you don't pay the tariff if the goods don't come into the country. And the other reason the revenues aren't higher is because businesses, basically everyone's trying to figure out how to make a bad situation better. And one of the ways they did that was by bringing in imports before the tariffs hit. And so we're seeing delayed effects, and some businesses are eating the tariffs because, one, they don't know if they're going to go away tomorrow, right? The court could throw them out next week, and the last thing you want to do is annoy all your customers by raising prices 10 or 15% and then have it go away. So they're going to hit, assuming that they don't all go away, and the net effect is not good. It's less growth, more inflation. There's a lot more going on than just the tariff story. And this chart, the source for this chart, and actually the source for the crazy tariff chart, that data comes from the Yale Budget Lab. And they're doing analysis of the policy proposals. And what this chart is showing is two components of US policy right now. The light blue bars are the impact on after-tax and after-transfer income from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Okay, and you might ask, well, so and those are negative numbers. So and the horizontal axis are income deciles. So each one of those is 0.1%, or excuse me, of the U.S. income distribution, right? So the top 10% is on the far right, and the bottom 10% is number one on the far left. And the light blue bars are negative until you get to about the third decile. So those people are getting tax cuts. But the other thing in the OBBA is there are big cuts to transfers, primarily Medicaid. but also SNAP benefits. So the people in the bottom of the income distribution, while they may not be paying taxes on tips, they may also be losing Medicaid benefits, losing healthcare benefits, losing SNAP benefits.
Wow.
And then what's added here that's not normally talked about is the impact of tariffs. So the lowest income households, and this is really relevant for your customers, because your customers who may have a hard time paying their water bill are also the ones who are getting hurt the most by the tariffs and the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, because the people at the top spend much less of their income on new cars and on clothing and food. People at the bottom spend a huge share of their income there. And on average, people at the bottom are expected to face roughly between $1,000 and $2,000 hit to their living expenses because of the tariffs. So you'll notice that you put all these together, you don't get into positive territory, net positive territory, until all the way out to the very top of the distribution, right? The sum of the two bars becomes positive. So we're all being affected negatively. So you've got an economy that is likely to have higher inflation. We've seen some evidence of it. We'll get a whole lot of data this week that we'll see what it says. One of those data points we'll get this week is, what's the Fed going to do? So the FOMC meets this week. And our bet, like most people, most commentators or economists, is that they're not going to lower rates this week. The dark blue line here is our forecast for the Fed funds rate. So we have it starting to go down in September, going down by 0.5 percentage point this year, roughly another full percentage point next year. Now, why would you be lowering interest rates if you're worried about higher inflation? Well, you'd be lowering interest rates because you're more worried about job losses, right? Which we haven't seen a lot of evidence of yet. But most, if the economy is going to grow 1%, 1 percentage point more slowly, it's going to grow in line with our forecast, then we're going to end up with job numbers that are well under 100,000 a month. And the Fed is going to start to be lowering interest rates for that reason. Unfortunately, the long-term interest rates aren't going to come down much. And in fact, you would be forgiven for being surprised that they've come down at all, given how much the fiscal policy in DC is adding to debt and deficits. Actually, that's what's holding the long-term interest rates up. So the gray bar is the 10-year bond rate, and the gray line is the 10-year bond rate. And basically, it's hovering around 4.3, 4.4%. We don't think it's going to fall below 4% for the foreseeable future. So the short rates will come down. The long rates will be held up by high debt, rising deficits in debt, and the expectation of sustained inflation rates above 2.5%. We could be wrong. Maybe it'll come down to 3.5%, but we're not seeing mortgage rates head back to 3% unless things get really, really bad. Now let's turn and talk strictly about Hawaii for a little while. And obviously, from the near-term perspective of what's driving Hawaii's economy, it's basically about tourism and construction in terms of the things that move the economy the fastest in the near term. What this is supposed to point out, this is comparing 2019 and 2024, and this is the average number of visitors on each island on any given day. And the purple, I don't know why we use purple for the US. I didn't do that. So anyway, if you look at Honolulu in the middle there, you see the jump from around 60,000 visitors on any given day to around 75, 80,000 visitors any given day for the purple bar. That shows you how much US visitors to Oahu have increased post-pandemic, or from the pandemic till now. And all the islands, with the exception of Maui, which is primarily a story about the wildfire, but all the islands have seen an increase in their share of US visitors, and they've all seen a decrease in their share of Japanese visitors. And the gold bars are Japan, and you can see that on Oahu, Japanese visitors are about half what they were pre-pandemic, and actually they're falling. I mean, we started this year, first 6 months of the year. Actually, we don't have 6 months data. We've only got data through May. Japanese visitors and Canadian visitors are both off high single digits. And so not only is there this issue of we've got most of our eggs in the US basket, but there are other risks to the international market that come from things like, well, we're going to take over Canada and the backlash from that, right? So we've seen, you can look at the data, Stats Canada publishes data on returning residents, and we've seen large, double-digit declines in Canadians who are traveling to the continent by air or by car. In Hawaii, it's high single digits. For the continent as a whole, it's more like closer to 20%. And then the other risk is that the tariff battles are reasonably likely to throw Canada and Japan into recession. And I mean, the automobile industry in Japan is a huge piece of their economy, and they're even a more export-oriented economy than we are. And now everything that they export to the U.S. costs 15% more after having tariff rates that were sub 3%. Now they're 5-6% higher than that, 5-6 times higher than that. So having said all that, the start of the year has been actually really good. And this is another one of those slides where it compares two different forecasts. The blue line was our forecast from the first quarter. The gold line was our forecast from the second quarter. And this is the average number of visitors in the state on any given day. And then the red dot shows you what the preliminary data says happened in Q1. So we under forecast, right? So basically what I'm trying to tell you is that our forecasts for the first few quarters of the year were too low. And the incoming data tells us, and then there's two green dots there. That shows you, so we run these models where we take the daily passenger counts and we take the number of airline seats that are scheduled to fly into the state, and we do what we call it, economists call these nowcasts. It just means you're forecasting something in the middle, within the quarter, for example. And so second quarter data is going to come in stronger than our forecast. Third quarter data we think is going to come in stronger. So we're going to be raising our forecast. That's all I'm trying to say. The year has started off strong. There's some pretty weird things going on in the data. So for example, real visitor spending on Oahu is up 11% through the first 5 months of the year. No other island has spending growth like that. So I can't explain it.
I was going to
Big Island and Kauai are both down, so like -5%. Maui is up about 9%. Maui, makes some sense because there's still a recovery process going on there. So this is something I have to dig into more. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me that we would see that kind of growth on Oahu.
Is it maybe they're purchasing before the tariffs really hit and increase prices, so trying to get it cheaper now than wait till later?
But so the reason I'm puzzled is because the number of people
Is down.
on Oahu is only up 2%, but the real spending is up 11%, and hotel prices aren't up. And overall, so this is real, right? Taking out the effects of inflation. So it's kind of, yeah, I shouldn't have brought it up to go in too much detail, except to say that it's a puzzle. I really can't explain it. But we will be undoubtedly raising our forecast when we release it in mid-September. And actually, the outlook or the data on jobs has actually been quite strong for Oahu, for the state, for Oahu, the whole state. These bars show you the absolute change in jobs from June of 2024 to June of 2025. And one of the things that is different about Hawaii than the country as a whole is we're seeing job growth pretty much across the board, all sectors except federal government. And the federal government loss, so federal government job losses in this data are a little over 1,000. That's not because of DOGE cuts. That's almost certainly just attrition. And the reason I say that is because the DOGE cuts are kind of like the tariffs. One day they're, we're going to let everybody go. The next day we're going to bring them all back. And the next day it's against the law, and they're just all over the place. But there has been a hiring freeze, and 1,000 federal civilian employees could be strictly, there's a hiring freeze and people are retiring, people are leaving, and some people are trying to get out before the DOGE cuts. But the rest of the economy has been adding jobs, again, mostly in healthcare and in sort of leisure, hospitality, food service, accommodations. That mostly happened the first 3 or 4 months of the year. And since April, the job numbers have really kind of gone sideways. So we may be starting to see some of the effects. Now, when we released our last forecast report, we did a deep dive to try to get an estimate of how many federal civilian employees we thought might lose their jobs because, so there were the DOGE cuts, and then many of them were deemed illegal. And so they've backtracked, and now they're going through a completely legal process, reduction in force, right? So and all the agencies, all the departments were required to put together plans for reductions in force. And when you go through those plans and you look at Hawaii's mix of federal employees, we estimated that there's about 2,700 federal civilian employees could end up losing their jobs in Hawaii. And when we did that, we excluded DOD. But even DOD has been announced as potentially exposed. Now we can hope that because of concerns about the Pacific and China that will be protected, but we don't really know. And then there's a whole bunch of jobs that they're not federal civilian jobs, but they're paid for with federal dollars, sort of direct pass through, whether it's, so for example, the top of the list is DHS with so these are state and local jobs. And so for example, there are programs at that are fully funded by the federal government. Same thing across all of these departments, DOE. And those jobs are at risk because DOE, other programs, DHS, are all certainly DOH, are all at risk of reductions in federal spending. So that number comes up to 3,300. So you can kind of get why we would have said that we might be headed for a mild recession, because you put several of these numbers together and you start talking about real numbers, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 jobs that could be lost. The good news is if we're completely wrong about the visitor spending and U.S. visitors are able to keep traveling and spending money despite the fact that they're paying more for everything at home, and despite the fact that maybe their income's not growing as fast, if that were to happen, there's enough need to fill, just like you're trying to fill positions, and it's hard, right? So if we end up with some of these layoffs on the federal side, from federal funding, there's certainly a need to fill positions throughout the rest of the economy if the rest of the economy keeps going. And one of the key pieces there is construction. And what this is an update of a chart from our second quarter forecast, and it shows the quarter-to-quarter growth in jobs. And the dark blue bars are construction jobs, and the gold bars are all other jobs in the economy. And so the point is, if you look to the left of the forecast line, or about the middle of the screen, the blue bars are almost universally higher than the gold bars. So essentially, job growth was being held up by construction over the last several years. Even when we lost $1 billion in visitor spending because of the Maui wildfires, the economy didn't go into recession, primarily because of the billions of dollars in construction spending that was flowing through the economy that has gotten us to record high levels of construction job counts. We think that's not likely to continue indefinitely, right? Once you get up to a certain level of activity with, say, whether you're moving roads for climate change from the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, or you're working on the dry dock at Pearl Harbor, once you ramp up, just same thing with the rail, right? You built a segment and then you build another segment, that doesn't increase jobs, right? Once you've started putting up towers, you put up one tower a year, that doesn't add more jobs, it just keeps you from seeing declines. Our forecast right now is for the construction job growth to start to taper off. There's some reasons why that might not happen, and that would be a good thing. One is we haven't put the stadium in here yet. When they start tearing it down, I think we'll put it in. That might not be a foolproof indicator that it'll actually get built, but I think that's a good place to start. There was also a very large NAVFAC contract that was let about a month ago, $8 billion, huge. But none of that money is, maybe it has since I checked, but when they let that, right, what that is, an announcement that we could spend this much and there's going to be task orders that various contractors are going to earn. And last I checked, none of that had been released. And we did a kind of a quick dive into past NAVFAC announcements like this. And by our check, not all that money gets spent usually. And so anyway, that is built in. You notice it says forecast preliminary 25 Q3 vintage. That means I've updated this and I've built that in, but that's spread out over 5 years. I think if I remember correctly, we took about half of it and said, okay, spread it out over 5 years. And it helps to slow the pace at which construction starts to wane as a driver of the economy. So I mentioned inflation several times. This is our forecast for Hawaii's inflation rate. So we're at 2.7% through, let's see, I think we're through May data. And so you can see the upward slope from about Q1 on this chart to moving to the right, and you peak at about 4%. So let's say Hawaii's inflation rate would have been 2.5%. The tariffs are enough to get us back up to 4%. And so our forecast for this year and next is for inflation roughly in the little bit higher than 3% range. And this is our overall forecast for statewide GDP. And I'm showing you the 3 different vintages here. The dark blue is our first quarter, the gold is our second quarter. And so notice for 2026, the gold bar is negative. So we were forecasting that we might see a mild recession. That's minus 0.2 or 0.3%. That's a pretty mild recession, but it's still a recession. And when I make some of the updates that we're working on right now, remember, this is preliminary, it's going to change. The light blue bar for 2026 is just slightly positive. That doesn't mean we won't have a recession, right? You don't have to have a whole year of negative GDP growth to have a recession. And it would still come with pretty weak job growth numbers. So it's probably going to feel a little bit like a recession no matter what, right? Particularly because people are going to feel the rising costs of things. So even if they still have a job and their income, isn't falling, it's going to feel painful.
Perception.
Yeah. And for many people, it will be painful, right? So a couple of quick slides about longer term trends, because I'm talking near term business cycles type stuff. So longer term, what matters is from a purely economic perspective, what determines how fast the economy grows is a combination of your labor force and how productive your workers are. Well, this is natural population change for each island. And so dark blue is Oahu, that's measured on the left axis. So back in 2010 on Oahu, we had around 7,000 more births than deaths. That's the natural population change. As of 2024, it's about 2,000. And the trends are the same across all the islands. And what's happening is that people are not having children. And we're all getting older, and death rates did increase during the pandemic. But on the neighbor islands, you're talking about no natural population change. So what that means is that your labor force can't grow over time unless people move here. But that's not what's happening, right? Rather, people are generally leaving. We have seen some variation in the last few years. This is our forecast for the gold bars are 2020, 2029. That's the whole decade compared to what they were the previous decade. It's pretty stark. So for Oahu, rather than growing at about the population by about 0.7%, we think the population will shrink by about 0.2%, which means it's even harder to have labor force growth. And because people are aging, they're also leaving the labor force, right? So there's an extra drag there as well. And all that points to economic growth that's slower yet. And Powell, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Carl, going back to the previous slide in terms of people leaving because of their age, as they age out.
Yeah.
You think there's going to be a trend that people will stay on the job longer?
Well, so, that's.
Given the uncertainty.
I do. And, so honestly, that's something that all employers are going to have to deal with, right? In the discussion about hiring efforts, one of the things that was mentioned was scheduling flexibility, right? So basically, the older workforce needs more scheduling flexibility, and even workforce my age or younger who's caring for older, right? Who's caring for their parents or their aunties. They need flexibility, and to the extent that employers adjust and allow for remote work or allow for different kinds of shifts, I think we will see more and more people working longer.
Do you stay competitive as
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, of course, there's also technological change, right? And the topic of AI comes up a lot with some, reasonable concerns about that possibly taking jobs away. But the whole country is going through the kind of decline in birth rates and declining natural population change, and now really a complete end to any kind of migration happening right now. And so I'm not too concerned about the impacts of AI. I'm more concerned about whether employers are able to adapt to new ways of working with their employees.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on.
Your crystal ball for the future?
I mean, we're after we get through the current challenges associated with tariffs and some of the cuts to social services. I have to say the thing that is the most worrisome is the impacts on the families who are least able to deal with rising costs. We will get through that, and the state's in a reasonably good position in terms of the overall state budget. We have a large amount of resources in the rainy day fund. The ledge set aside resources to try and address, and we don't know what's going to happen with the midterms, but it's possible that some of these policies will start to get reversed in 2 or 3 years when the pain really starts to hit. Remember, the Medicaid cuts don't happen until the end of 2026. They're set up so that they happen after the midterms. So that the people who might be voting won't see that their benefits are being hit. But when we get past that, the demographics is the primary story, and that's why I included it here. And that tells us that longer term for Hawaii, and I mean in the next decade, we're looking at pretty limited growth unless we do something different. And by do something different, I mean make it conducive for our keiki to stay home and for our keiki to come home, right? To come back to the islands, because we've created a housing, an economy where people can thrive. So it's up to us. I mean, it's not easy. There's nothing easy about making the economy dynamic and create high-paying, living wage jobs and creating the housing. We're making progress on the housing, I think faster than any of us have seen certainly in the last 20 or 30 years. And everybody's pulling the canoe in the same direction, it feels like, for the first time.
Have you taken a look at one of the places that I concern myself with? We've seen the demographic cliff coming for a while in higher ed. And so college going rates are falling quicker because it's not just about demographics, but other reasons why people want to go to college. And the kind of positions that we look for typically in our industries are engineers who need to go to college. So I think that as bad as the demographics are, it's worse when you think about the impact of reduction in higher going rates. Have you looked at?
So Rachel Inafuku does labor economics and education and some health, and she has written about college going to UH specifically, and has also looked at sort of the impact of a UH degree. And we've actually seen a little bit of an uptick recently. I don't know about engineering, but the basic trend, you're right, and it's a concern. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I wasn't thinking about it in terms of, there's fewer people, but if you also have fewer people going to college, then the certain skilled workforce. So one thing that leads me to think about is whether there's not connections that, I don't know if you are already doing internship programs, I'm sure you probably are, and whether, basically whether there's more we can do in terms of making those connections and going all the way down like to the high school level, so that kids recognize that there's a path, right? It's pretty disturbing how little the high school age kids know about the pathways, and various different organizations are working to not only establish internships, but to also educate high schoolers about what they need to do to get to that end point. Let them know there's an end point there. There's an engineering job at the Board of Water Supply waiting for you when you finish, and here's how you get from point A to point B, because you got to do the math in high school. If you haven't done the math, it's not going to work.
But the cost of higher ed going up too, where people are making these determinations earlier and earlier, and in a lot of cases say it's not worth it, right? Because you just that cost.
Wrong, but and that's some of the stuff that we've been working on, is to try to make clear there's still a dramatic difference in lifetime earnings from the college degrees. Even an associate's degree is very much preferred to, right, just to a high school education or on the job training.
I think there's always been a push for engineers and need for more engineers, but I think that's only a part of the story, because there's also the skilled folks that are maybe going to the community colleges that come out with the skills that are necessary, like in construction, but here it could be in the operations area too, that there's actually a good career ahead of them, but they don't know about these jobs and what actions they can take to prepare. So I think maybe the other aspect is working with community colleges.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the construction industry did this, I want to say 15, 20 years ago. And I think it's not KCC.
HCC?
Yeah, I think so. Set up a program to train, and I think it was carpentry primarily, and get people the skills they need. And it's really working with all levels, but for those skilled trades, if you can, but you still have to be prepared, right? It goes further than community college. It also has to, then the community college has to have the connection down to the high school and the DOE.
Or the employers can get to start to build those connections.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of, like in Waikalo High School, the Academy of Engineering. And also I think in the health field too. But there isn't maybe a bigger program for folks that don't think about going to college, but go for 2 years and come out with a skilled trade that will pay well.
And you mentioned a couple of them that are very primary. The Hawaii Pacific Health Program in healthcare can take someone out of high school and get them into a skilled, I don't know the exact health position title, what it's called, but it's pretty amazing programs.
Thank you, Carl.
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure.
Barry has a question.
Hey, Carl. My question is, and thank you for mentioning that you folks are grabbing your own data and you have your data sources. I get the impression that, the federal government with the cuts and stuff are cutting some of the statistical, the guys that provide the data. So
they are.
what's your confidence going forward on the data that you then are driving
Well, so there is less confidence.
Yeah.
But that goes all the way back to the pandemic so a lot of this data is survey data. So for example, all the consumer price data is survey data. All of the jobs data is initially a survey data. It ultimately becomes not a survey where they use the unemployment insurance records to line the data up once a year. But the initial data, when we get the monthly jobs report, there's a survey that goes out to businesses. And there's also a survey that goes out to households. And the participation rate in those surveys has been declining ever since the pandemic. And so the sample sizes get smaller. So that automatically causes problems. It just means that the data point, okay, so if we say inflation is 2.5%, well, it might be 2 3/4, or it might be 2 1/4, right? There's more uncertainty about it. But now, on top of that, because of hiring freezes, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has actually stopped publishing data for some metro areas because they don't have enough employees. So when they're doing the price data, they literally send people out to go check the prices in stores, right? So, they literally will send a price checker into a grocery store with a little computer, and they don't have the people, so they can't collect the data. So it's probably not having a huge impact at the national level. I don't have any direct evidence that it's impacting the state of Hawaii, but it is a concern for sure. And the people who are doing the work, these are the other thing is that they're getting beaten up, right? They're being essentially accused of being lazy and these are career civil servants who do incredible work. Yeah, we do worry about it, but we don't have any hard evidence yet that it's actually showing up. I mentioned the tourism data. I worry about that as well because if anybody's flown recently, I'll bet you didn't fill out a ag form. I know.
On return,
Yeah, you did?
Yeah.
Quite to this island
Yeah,
yeah.
recently?
yeah. June and July.
Interesting. And was it online? Was it digital?
No, it's paper.
Wow. So, they're changing over to digital. And for a while, I know several people who have flown. I just flew and came back. I was expecting to get the ag form, didn't get one. And so then we also lost the passenger count data for several weeks because that was collected in part of that process. So I'm worried a little bit about that, but hopefully we'll know how many visitors are here and how much they're spending. Yeah.
Yeah,
I get
yeah.
two more questions.
Okay. I'll make the answer shorter then.
No. Grocery prices, something among prices, I see it
Yeah.
rising. What affects us is construction pricing.
Yeah.
Supply and materials availability, aluminum and steel. Are you seeing those prices go up?
So unfortunately, we don't see those prices, right? So the best we can do on those is to look at national data. But I am certainly hearing from builders that they're struggling with price increases. And the other problem is you might not be able to get a price quote, right? So,
Or
when-
one that's on good for
Yeah,
4 hours.
right, or maybe a month, right? But
Less.
yeah, how do you plan a project when?
So we're already getting feedback from the suppliers
Mhm.
on the contractor community. This reminds me of like the recession days or other days in the past where copper prices were uncertain.
Yeah.
Maybe good for 2 weeks. So they're kind of struggling with this. But what's killing everybody is the uncertainty.
Yes.
If there was some certainty of direction, then you could start to plan and adjust for it. But because this can change from day to day or multiple times during the day. That's kind of creating this really hard, difficult time to be in business.
So that's the sense in which, getting an announcement that it's 15% on Japan, it's 15% on EU, in which that could be perceived as an improvement, because it feels like it's a little more certain. Of course, this is not a trade deal. This is like just an announcement, right? And so again, it could change tomorrow if the EU does something that our president doesn't like, it could go back to 30%. So the uncertainty is still there. It's feeling a little more certain. I don't know if anybody had heard this story, but there's a ship coming from Australia that's headed to Honolulu right now to try to get here before the end of the month when the tariff on copper goes to 50%. And they're rushing, right? They probably would have gone to Long Beach, but we're closer. So if they can get here and get through customs, they'll get the old price and then everybody else will be willing. So there's a little arbitrage going on here. Someone's going to make a lot of money if they can get those ships here on time. So yeah, I'm hearing the same things without having a hard data point.
The challenge is how do we deal with that kind of uncertainty or fluctuating environment and still be able to get the projects completed?
Yeah. I mean, you have to, I think what we will be doing is as we adjust our forecasts is our take is that uncertainty will cause some projects to stop, right? And they'll just take a wait and see attitude, or they just won't pencil because they'll have the costs in front of them, even if they don't know they're going to change in 6 months. And they'll just say, this doesn't make any sense. This project no longer makes sense. And so that is the sense in which in our last forecast, we were talking about the construction growth really stopping, right? Not being a major contributor to growth. Now, we're not saying that's going to fall off the cliff, but not sort of continued momentum up. And I'm hearing the same story from basically, you talk to any builder, any developer, they're telling you the same story.
Yeah. And my last question so far is I'm trying to forecast water demand. And you get a combination of conflicting or opposing factors, climate change, increasing temperatures, increasing demand, conservation efficiencies, bringing water demand down. But you're saying that the population is actually decreasing all along.
It has been. Yeah, and we think it will continue.
It's like a demographic change, right? The baby boomers like me, we're all retiring.
Well, but then that doesn't, but you don't leave. It's really people dying.
Births.
Yeah.
And the age of our population keeps going up, which means that you're going to have more people passing away and people aren't having babies.
Expensive.
It's post Great Recession. So this started during the Great Recession. That's why I started that slide all the way back to 2010. And when we were forecasting the period 2009, 2010, after the Great Recession, we were forecasting the birth rate would come back up again, and it never did. And demographers all around the world were surprised by this, and it's happening everywhere. And so, presumably it's all of the factors that you could imagine: high cost, concern about climate change, concern about the political environment or the fracturing in society, all the things that you would think about if you're thinking about raising a family. So, these are not huge drops in population, right? 0.1, 0.2, 0.3%. But if it keeps going for long enough, right, it catches up with you.
So are families getting smaller?
Yeah, and yes, they are. That's right. Yeah, if you look at the household size statewide, it is getting smaller.
Which leads to population decline over time.
Well, but it could also, I don't know if it would lead to more water use or less water use, right? If you've got more households, smaller size, it's possible that could drive up water use a little bit.
Sounds like another research study.
Yeah.
Don't give them ideas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good job.
Carl, thank you for your time today.
Wow.
Okay, we're moving on to item number 4, status update of groundwater levels at all index stations. Chair recognizes Barry Usigawa. Aloha, Barry. Thank you for the pointed questions in the last inquiry as well.
Thank you. Just trying to help by forecasting. Yeah, so sharing members for aquifer index stations in low groundwater condition for June. Pearl City and Wailua in caution. They're just in caution. Kaimuki and Punaluu in alert. I can show you those graphs. The monthly production for June is 144 million gallons per day, rising through the summer. The rainfall index for June was 77% of normal. The 5-month moving average, 82%. The Hawaii Drought Monitor showing abnormally dry conditions across Oahu, and on the leeward side, moderate drought conditions. I'll have a graphic to show that. National Weather Service is forecasting below normal precipitation through September. Nothing unusual there. The monitoring wells exhibit stable and slightly decreasing head levels. Yeah, because it's hotter and people are and the rainfall. Yeah, so that's the rainfall graph, 77% of normal in June. In the pumpage, the pumpage is 144, so it's higher than the 5-month moving average and the same month last year in 2024. So it's been kind of off on, hotter and drier in certain months with some big storms in between, but it's driving the demand a little bit higher. Our high months are in July, August, and September, and so we'll see how that tracks when we get to those points. And then the last map is the drought monitor. And so when we say D0, abnormally dry, it's at the lowest scale, the yellow. Most of Oahu is in yellow, and it's so small you can't really see the D1 and leeward, that light orange there. It seems to me that the northern islands get a little bit more rain than the southern islands this time of year. But we'll see how that tracks. When it gets into the red and dark, that's severe and exceptional droughts. So we're just into the drought scale there. So that's my report. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. Just a quick question, Barry, on this last slide. The report, how often does it update?
Every week, I believe. And I remember a friend, Kevin Kodamo, who has retired from the Federal National Weather Service. They would call farmers and cattle and ranchers around the state, because it's not just the rainfall data that they have in their rain gauges. They also ask for on the ground validation of that data. So it was fairly comprehensive. It would come out every week. I don't know about it going forward, but that's how it was.
Okay. Thank you. Members, any other questions? Thank you, Barry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Moving on to item number 5, water main repair report for June 2025. Chair recognizes Daniel Lee. Hello, Daniel.
Hello, Chair. Good afternoon, Board Chair and members. I'm Daniel Lee, Acting Assistant Program Administrator for Food Operations. I have the water main and leak detection reports for the month of June. We had 21 main breaks, 9 were leaks, 11 were breaks, and there was 1 damage. For the leak detection report, we had 23 points of interest. We found 26 leaks. 1 was on the main, 21 were meter coupling leaks, 4 leaks on the customer side, and there were 3 service leaks. Are there any questions?
Members, any questions? Okay, Danny, thank you for your time. Okay, that brings us to our last agenda item. If there's no other business, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Vice Chair Jonathan Conchero,
Aye.
Board Member Brian Andaya,
Aye.
Board Member Lance Woman,
All right.
Member Kale Manipugu,
Aye.
Member Gino Ano,
Aye.
and Chair Nalegu Anthony.
Aye.
Chair motion passes with 6 ayes.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you for a good meeting. Thanks to Carl for some great information, and please gavel us out. Thank you all.